fact, you have been on the ground in Somalia. Do I have that right?
Correct. Yeah, I was in Mogadishu, and then I also took a separate trip into Somalia by crossing over the Kenya border.
So tell us what you discovered.
Well, I went to Somalia with the intent of going into Mogadishu, the capital city, as part of an investigation I've been working on for a couple of years into U.S. targeted killing operations. And I didn't go in with one specific story in mind. But when I arrived in Mogadishu, within 48 hours of going there, I was traveling with my colleague and friend Rick Rowley of Big Noise Films. We discovered a new CIA facility at the airport in Mogadishu where they're training Somali agents as part of a counterterrorism training program to go after members of Al-Shabaab, an Islamic militant group with ties to Al-Qaeda. And we also met people that told us they had been in a secret underground prison in the basement of Somalia's National Security Agency. And when we examined and investigated that further and found Somali officials who work in those facilities, they told us that CIA personnel regularly interrogate prisoners, and that in fact the CIA is paying the salaries of the intelligence operatives that are running this program. So for all practical purposes, the U.S. is utilizing a black site and paying the salaries of the people that run it and interrogating prisoners, some of whom were rendered, snatched off the streets of neighboring Nairobi in Kenya, and taken to this underground prison and held in a dungeon-like quarter with no access to the outside world, no lawyers, no judges, no Red Cross, no sunlight. And they described people basically going nuts in this underground facility, going crazy.
Yeah, in your article, you talked about them just sitting and rocking vacantly or pacing back and forth like a caged animal. First of all, the renditions. Well, actually, both. Has the Obama administration, because I don't specifically remember, has the Obama administration come out and explicitly said, I know that they've explicitly said that they've stopped doing torture, but have they come out and explicitly said that they're no longer doing extraordinary rendition, in other words, kidnapping people and taking them someplace for interrogation? And have they said that they have stopped using black sites?
Well, I'll take the last part of it first. President Obama, when he issued his executive orders within days of taking office, characterized it as a dismantling of the Bush-era policies of torture and secret sites, et cetera. And many people interpreted that, particularly liberals or people on the left, to be that he was shutting down these operations. But they did allow for special operations, special considerations that would can allow that program to continue, the program of using the renditions. But if you read closely, as I'm sure you did, because I know you're that way, Tom, what I reported, what it seems like the U.S. is doing is hiding behind semantics, because what U.S. officials told me is that they provide intelligence to the Kenyans suggesting that certain people should be taken off the streets, and then the Kenyans go and render them. So the U.S. can say, we're not rendering prisoners, but the Kenyan anti-terrorist forces that work very closely with the U.S., they're doing the renditions, and then the U.S. is interrogating the prisoners. So at the end of the day, it really is a difference, or a distinction without a difference.
Did you mean Kenyans or Somalis? I mean, is there a third country involved in this, Kenya?
Oh, yeah, Kenya. I mean, see, what I think is perhaps the most controversial aspect of this that bears investigation is that the Kenyan government is engaged in renditions on behalf of the United States, picking up Kenyan citizens and then sending them to Somalia, where they are then interrogated by U.S. CIA personnel. That should be investigated. We're not talking about people that are angels here, that the U.S. is hunting down. But they're people that have rights under international laws and actually under the U.S. Constitution and U.S. law. So when you snatch someone off the streets of a city in their own country, of their citizenship, and then send them to a country that they're not a citizen of, and then they're questioned by yet a third country, the United States, that calls into question whether there's been any change from the Bush era, because that's exactly what the Bush administration was doing regularly.
Well, and the Bush administration had an elaborate legal rationale for this provided to them by John Yoo and Jay Bybee, who are now respectively law professors and federal judges. But tragically, I think they should be in the court of law as the defendants. But first of all, this is pretty explosive stuff that the Obama administration is doing this and continuing to do this. Why is it not being picked up by the corporate media?
Well, you know what happened, Tom, is, and it's sort of a classic old school CIA operation with full complicity of corporate media outlets. My story went online around 1 p.m. Last week on Wednesday, and that evening at about 5, the first corporate media coverage happened, and it was a CNN story by Barbara Starr, the Pentagon spokesperson. I mean, CNN's Pentagon correspondent, and she was just printing a story that made no mention of what we had reported and simply said that a senior U.S. official told CNN that the U.S. was working with the Somalis to interview terrorism suspects that were being held by the Somali government. And it was a pure propaganda spin operation that was then followed up by ABC News and the Los Angeles Times. In the case of CNN and the LA Times, they gave no context as to why U.S. officials were coming to them spinning this story. They just printed it as though it was news in and of itself. And what it really was the CIA trying to manage this story with propaganda aimed at saying, we're really just interviewing people. The Somalis are inviting us to do it. These media outlets made no mention, Tom, of the fact that the U.S. is paying the salaries of these people. The U.S. government doesn't deny that. They confirmed it to me, that they are present in that prison. They confirmed that. They didn't deny it. And that they are running this CIA base at the airport. So, you know, these big corporate media outlets have not just missed the story or misreported the story, they've allowed themselves to be used as conveyor belts for propaganda and spin of the CIA. And that, you know, CIA has done a very good job of spinning them.
Is there any possibility, Jeremy, assuming that the way that they have constructed this isn't so convoluted that somehow technically it actually is legal, that there's some, you know, third-party separation in there, and if anybody was to be prosecuted, it would actually be the Somalis or the Kenyans. But assuming that there is an international crime being committed here by the United States, I'm curious if your reporting has been picked up in Europe or any other countries that may then take that a step further and try to hold this administration accountable, the way that, for example, there was, you know, rumbles when Michael Ratner was working with the Germans about arresting Don Rumsfeld back in 2005, I think it was, or 2006.
Right. Well, my understanding as of now, I mean, there are several international legal organizations, the Center for Constitutional Rights that you just mentioned among them, but also Reprieve, which is the British legal and human rights organization. Clive Stafford Smith, probably the most prominent attorney with that firm, has represented scores of Guantanamo prisoners and represented them in U.S. courts and elsewhere around the world. They've told me that they are preparing to file a habeas petition on behalf of a Kenyan citizen who was rendered, they believe, on orders from the United States to Somalia, and they believe that that it is the Obama administration that needs to answer to this, and the U.S. government that needs to answer to the case of this man named Ahmed Abdullahi Hassan, who was snatched in July of 2009 and taken to this underground prison. And we have sources that indicate that he is, in fact, being held in that dungeon. And when I spoke to U.S. officials about this, they not only didn't deny it, but they told me he was a very bad man that needed to be taken off the streets, and that it was U.S. intelligence that resulted in him being taken off the streets. So there's a pretty clear line of complicity at a minimum on the part of the Obama administration. It'll take a court challenge or you know, aggressive FOIA requests to be able to conclude that he was in fact taken on orders from Washington rather than just a strong suggestion.
Remarkable. Jeremy Scahill, some brilliant reporting, TheNation.com, investigative journalist, national security reporter for The Nation magazine, correspondent for Democracy Now!, and the author of Blackwater, The Rise of the World's Most Powerful Mercenary Army. Jeremy, good work.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for what you're doing.
Thanks for being with us.